September 1st, 1943. Rabaul Airfield, New Britain. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai's hand paused over the intelligence report. His one good eye, the other lost to American gunners a year earlier. Scanning words that made him laugh out loud in the hot and humid operations tent. The Americans have made a new fighter. It is heavy like a bomber and wide like a transport. They call it Hellcat. Our intelligence says it weighs twice as much as our Zero. Another American mistake in design. Through the tent flaps, he could see his squadron's A6M0, lined up on the pierced steel planking, sleek, fast, and deadly for 2 years. These planes had dominated the skies of the Pacific. British Hurricanes, American P-40 S Dutch Brewster Buffaloes, as all had fallen to the Zero's guns. The Americans' latest try, this big bloated Hellcat, would be no different. What Sakai did not know, and what none of the Japanese naval pilots, gathering for their morning briefing, knew, was that in exactly 30 days, this failure would start the total destruction of Japanese naval aviation. The F6F Hellcat would get a kill ratio of 19-1, destroying 5,223 enemy planes while losing only 270 in air fights. It would change carrier warfare, break the back of Japanese air power, and prove that the Zero's fearsome rule had been built on deadly wrong ideas. The numbers of air control were about to be changed by a plane that looked wrong, flew heavy, and seemed to go against every rule the Japanese had made. Yet within 6 months, the very pilots now laughing at the reports would be writing last letters home, knowing that meeting Hellcats meant almost certain death. The rising sun at its top, the Japanese Navy's confidence in September 1943 was not arrogance. It was the numbers. Since December 7th, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service had won ratios that were almost unbelievable. At Pearl Harbor, they lost 29 planes while destroying 347. In the Philippines, 7 losses against 103 destroyed. Over Darwin, 2 losses versus 30. The British Far East Fleet's Air Force was destroyed. The Dutch East Indies Air Force gone in days. At the center of this power flew the Mitsubishi A6M0, a plane that had changed all the rules of fighter design. When captured examples were tested by American engineers. In 1942, they first did not believe the numbers. A fighter with the range of a bomber, the moves of a biplane, and the guns to destroy anything it found. It seemed impossible. Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishiwa, who would become Japan's top ace with 87 confirmed kills, wrote about the Zero in his recovered diary. Flying the Zero is like wearing wings. The plane moves with your thoughts, not just your controls. American planes fly like trucks, strong but clumsy. They build fighters like they build cars, heavy, overbuilt, and wasteful. The Zero got its amazing performance from a new design idea, extra super duralumin. A secret aluminum mix made the structure 30% lighter than similar American planes. No armor plate protected the pilot. No self-sealing fuel tanks added weight. Even the radio was often taken out to save 30 pounds. Every bit was given up for performance. The intelligence ignored the first reports of the F6F Hellcat, which reached Japanese intelligence through neutral Swedish sources in early 1943. The numbers seemed like propaganda, or maybe a trick. The plane weighed 12,186 pounds loaded. The Zero weighed 5,800. Its wing area was 334 square feet with a draggy radial engine. It had 2,400 rounds of ammo armor plates all over bulletproof glass and self-sealing tanks holding 250 gallons of fuel. Captain Minoru Genda, the tactical genius who planned Pearl Harbor, looked at the numbers at Combined Fleet Headquarters. His notes kept in Japanese defense records were dismissive. The Americans learned nothing. This Hellcat is just more of their failed ideas trying to beat pilot skill. With heavy machines, a Zero will fly circles around it. The numbers seemed to prove him right. The Zero's wing load of 22 pounds per square foot gave it a turning radius of 612 feet. The Hellcat's wing load of 36.5 pounds per square foot meant a turning radius over 900 feet. In a turning fight, the main Japanese fighter tactic, the Hellcat, would be useless. The first sighting, September 30th, 1943. Marcus Island, Petty Officer, First Class. Yoshio Fukui was flying escort on a scout mission when he saw them. 6 dark blue planes climbing from the southeast. His first thought in the after-action report was B-25 bombers on a strange course. Then they turned and he saw the shape. Single engine, big body wings, too short for the plane. First meeting with an F6F type fighter, he wrote, first idea. Americans put fighter guns on a torpedo bomber and used normal tactics. Normal tactics meant using the Zero's better turn rate to get behind the enemy. Fukui rolled into a diving turn, thinking the heavy American plane would fly straight, letting him get behind it. Instead, something new happened. The Hellcat did not run. It did not try to turn with him. It went straight up, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine. The double Wasp engine made 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero's Nakajima Sakai, 1,130 horsepower, and drove the Hellcat up at 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui, trying to follow, saw his speed drop as the Zero struggled against gravity. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat did a move that should not have been possible for its weight, a hammerhead turn that put it right on Fukui's tail. The Americans started firing at 400 meters. Fukui reported, 6 machine guns, not the 4 we expected. The amount of fire was like nothing before. My plane took 17 hits in 3 seconds. Only by going into a spin did I get away. Fukui survived, barely making it back to Marcus Island with his Zero full of holes. His wingman, Petty Officer Second Class Masao, did not come back. Neither did the scout plane. They were protecting. First blood to the Hellcat, the weight paradox. October 5th, 1943. Task Force 14 attacked Wake Island. Lieutenant Yoshio led 12 Zeros from the 252nd Air Group to meet what looked like another small raid. American carriers had been sending these quick attacks for months, usually running away before Japanese fighters could fully fight. This time it would be different. We climbed to 20,000 feet, Shiga wrote in his diary. Below us 12 F6F fighters in 3 groups. We had every advantage. Altitude, position, surprise, victory seemed sure. The fight that came broke Japanese fighter rules. As the Zeros dived on the Hellcats, the American planes did not scatter or try to turn. They stayed in formation, going down in a gentle dive, keeping their energy high. When the Zeros fired from far away, hoping for lucky hits, the Hellcats just took it. The Hellcat had armor, 212 pounds of plates protecting the pilot, 110 pounds around the oil system, self-sealing tanks that could take many hits. As the Zeros ran out of ammo and diving attacks, the Hellcats started their counterattack. Instead of turning into a dogfight, they used their weight as a weapon. Climbing at full power, they reached heights where the Zero's engine could not get enough air. At 25,000 feet, the Hellcat was still making 1,650 horsepower. The Zero was down to 900. They came down on us like hawks on sparrows, Shiga wrote. Their weight gave them speed we could not match. They would dive, fire those 6 terrible guns, and then climb away before we could react. 8 Zeros were shot down. No Hellcats were lost. The Marianas Turkey Shoot prophecy. November 11th, 1943. Rabal, the pilots of the 204th Air Group, listened as Lieutenant Commander Tao Tanamizu gave them a briefing on American tactics. Tanamizu, with 32 victories, was one of the few pilots who had survived many encounters with Hellcats. Forget everything you know about air combat, he told them. The Americans have changed the rules. They do not fight our fight. They fight like executioners, not warriors. Tanamizu explained what Japanese pilots were slowly and fatally learning. The Hellcat was not made to outturn the Zero. It was made to never need to. Using a fighting style called energy fighting, Hellcat pilots kept their speed and height, turning their potential energy into movement in fast attacks that gave Zero pilots no chance to use their better turning. They work in pairs, Tanamizu said, 1 high, 1 low. While you fight one, the other is already diving on you. Their radios, which we laughed at for adding weight, let them work together perfectly. We fly as lone samurai. They fight as one machine. The technology gap. December 1943. TR Lagoon Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who led the Pearl Harbor attack, now worked as air operations officer for the combined fleet. His check of damaged Zeros coming back from fights with Hellcats showed the growing technology gap. The difference in firepower was like numbers. The Hellcat's 6 Browning M2 machine guns fired 750 rounds each per minute, 4,500 rounds total. Each .50 caliber bullet weighed 46 grams and went at 2,900 feet per second, giving 3,500 foot-pounds of energy. The Zero's 27.7 millimeter guns fired bullets weighing 11 grams at 2,300 feet per second, giving 750 foot-pounds of energy. More scary were the reports of American radar-guided fighter control. While Japanese pilots still used their eyes to see enemies, Hellcat pilots were guided to their targets by ship radar controllers who could see Japanese planes from 50 miles away. Lieutenant Sadamu Kumachi told about his first radar-guided fight. We were climbing through clouds. When they hit us, no warning, no sight, Hellcats diving from above, exactly on our path, perfectly placed. They knew where we were, our height, our course. We were blind men fighting those who could see in the dark. The pilot crisis. January 1944. The Japanese pilot problem was getting worse. The pre-war Imperial Navy pilot training program was the toughest in the world. Training took 3 years with pilots entering fights with 700 flight hours. Army pilots got at least 500 hours. They were artists in air fighting trained in aerobatics, shooting, and the spiritual side of air combat. By early 1944, Japanese naval pilots went into fights with only 300 flight hours. Army pilots with 200 fuel shortages meant most training was done in gliders. Shooting practice was limited to 50 rounds per pilot. Formation, flying instrument, flight, Hadium, rules all cut to rush pilots to the front. Meanwhile, American pilots arrived with at least 300 hours, including 50 hours in the type. They had fired thousands of practice bullets, practiced carrier landings until they were automatic, and learned energy. Tactics safely over Texas airfields. Lieutenant Commander Yoshihiro Hashimoto, training officer at Kasumigara Naval Air Station, wrote in his final report, "We are sending children to fight professionals yesterday. Ensign Yamamoto arrived at the front. He had never fired his guns in flight. We have no bullets for practice. He had never flown at night. We have no fuel for that training. He lasted 7 minutes in his first fight." The Formosa Revelation. October 12 to 16, 1944. The Battle of Formosa. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukuome, commander of the 2nd Air Fleet, sent everything to stop the American carrier attacks on Formosa. Over 700 planes, including the last trained pilots from Homeland training squads. The Japanese said they won big 26 carriers and battleships, sunk 300 planes, destroyed. The truth found only after pilots returned and gun camera film was looked at was terrible. Real American losses, 89 planes. Japanese losses, 300, 29 planes, and almost every skilled pilot. Lieutenant Sadaki Akamatsu, one of the few survivors, described the slaughter in his memoirs. The Hellcats were waiting at every height. As we climbed, they were above us. As we dived, they were below. They divided the sky into sections, each covered by a division. It was not a fight. It was planned killing. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. June 19, 1944. The Philippine Sea. The Japanese Navy used its rebuilt carrier force for Operation Ago. The fight meant to destroy American carrier power in the Pacific 9 carriers. 450 planes, their best remaining pilots, against them. Task Force 58 with 15 carriers and 156 planes, 450 of them. F6F Hellcats. Admiral Jabaro Ozawa sent his strikes in 4 waves, sure that Japanese pilot skill and the Zero's long range would win. The first wave of 69 planes took off at 8:30, American radar saw them at 150 miles. Hellcats were guided for perfect interception. With height advantage, sun behind them coming from the Japanese blind spots. Lieutenant Zenji Arbe, leading the fighter escort, saw the Hellcats minutes before the fight. They were stacked from 20,000 to 30,000 feet, at least 60 of them, waiting like a steel wall. We were at 18,000 feet. Every advantage was theirs. The fight lasted 12 minutes. Of 69 Japanese planes, 42 were shot down. Commander David McKell, CAG, of Air Group 15, shot down 7 planes in that one day. His wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, got 6. "The Zeros tried to turn with us," McKell said. "We just refused. We would make a high side run, shoot one down, then zoom, climb back to height. They would try to follow the stall out, and another Hellcat would shoot them." By the end of the day, the Japanese had lost 346 carrier planes plus 50 land planes. American losses, 30 planes from all causes. American pilots in their ready rooms that night called it a turkey shoot. The enemy planes were as helpless as game birds. The Lee Gulf record, October 24, 1944. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, Commander David McCampbell set his single mission record in this fight. Leading 7 Hellcats from Essex, he met a force of 60 Japanese planes heading for the American fleet. In the 90-minute fight, McKell shot down 9 planes, 5 Zeros, and 4 bombers, while his wingman Roy Rushing destroyed 6 more. "I ran out of bullets after the 9th kill." McKell wrote, "The Hellcat worked perfectly. Not a single hit on my plane, even though we were outnumbered 8-1. This fight showed the full reversal of air power. 7 Hellcats beat 60 Japanese planes, destroying 15. With no losses. McCampbell's 2. Ace in a day action, 7 kills on June 19th and 9 on October 24th, earned him the Medal of Honor and Navy Cross. The psychological collapse. The aftermath of the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf fights caused what Japanese military psychologists later called Hellcat psychosis among surviving pilots. Admiral Ozawa, in his after-action report, wrote, "The enemy's radar-guided fighter control did something we thought impossible, the industrialization of air combat. Each Hellcat was not a single fighter but part of a huge machine. Our pilots, no matter how skilled, were fighting not planes but a system. The pilot shortage got so bad that by early 1945, training was cut to 40 to 50 hours for Navy pilots, 60 to 70 hours for Army pilots. Kamikaze pilots got only 40 to 50 hours total, about 7 days of training. The Okinawa Apocalypse. April to June 1945. Operation Iceberg. The Japanese launched 1,900 kamikaze attacks on the American fleet off Okinawa. The Hellcat became not just a fighter, but a shield against desperate suicide attacks. Lieutenant Eugene Valencia, leading his Flying Circus division of Hellcats, shot down 23 Japanese planes during the campaign. His new tactics, using 4-plane divisions in coordinated attacks, made old Japanese tactics suicidal. "We developed what we called the mowing machine," Valencia explained. 4 Hellcats in a line side by side, separated by 100 yards, would sweep through Japanese formations at high speed. Each pilot watched his area. We would make one pass, climb back up, and do it again. The numbers of the Okinawa campaign were clear. Hellcats flew 38 combat missions, claiming 2,351 victories against 249 losses, a 9.5 to 1 ratio. More importantly, they stopped about 80% of kamikaze planes from reaching their targets. The technology gap. By 1945, the technology gap had become impossible to bridge. The F6F Hellcat had improvements that made it even deadlier. Water injection that boosted power to 2,200 horsepower, zero-length rocket launchers, better armor in the K-14 computing gun sight that calculated aiming automatically. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, Japan's famous ace, with 28 official victories, though modern historians guess closer to 15, met Hellcats for the first time in June 1944. Despite his skill and experience, he was almost killed in his first fight. "I did my best aerobatics," he wrote in his autobiography. "Loops, rolls, splits, every move I had perfected over 200 fights. The Hellcat followed easily, almost like it was casual. I survived only because the American pilot made a mistake. He forgot to drop his fuel tank before the fight. The human cost." By the end of the war, the F6F Hellcat had destroyed 5,223 enemy planes in air fights, lost 270 planes to enemy fighters, had a kill ratio of 19.3 to 1, produced 305 U.S. Navy aces, and scored 75% of all Navy air-to-air victories. The cost for Japan was terrible. Of the 18,000 naval pilots who started the war, fewer than 100 experienced pilots were left by August 1945. The kamikaze equation. The change of Japanese naval aviation from an elite force to kamikaze attacks showed the full power of the Hellcat. Unable to fight normally, Japan turned its pilots into human missiles. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi, father of the kamikaze program, explained it with clear numbers. If a Zero attacks a carrier, normally chance of success is almost zero. The Hellcats will destroy it. If the Zero becomes a bomb, chance of hitting goes up to 30%. The pilot dies either way. At least as a kamikaze, his death has meaning. On October 25, 1944, Hiroyoshi Nishizawa escorted the first official kamikaze mission, led by Lieutenant Yukio Siki, claiming his 86th and 87th victories, 2 F6F Hellcats in the process. The next day, October 26, 1944, Nishizawa died as a passenger on a transport shot down by Hellcats from VF-14. Japan's best ace, helpless without a fighter, was killed by the very plane he had briefly beaten. The final testimony, August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito's surrender broadcast. At Atsugi Airfield, Captain Minoru Genda, who had said the Hellcat was all weight, not skill, listened to the Emperor's words. Around him sat the remains of Japanese naval aviation, teenage pilots with only 40 hours of flight, aircraft put together from spare parts, empty fuel tanks that same day. Annie and Clarence Moore of F-31, flying from USS Belowood, shot down a Yokosuka D-4 Judy dive bomber. After 2 p.m., the last air victory of World War II, the Japanese pilot, not knowing about the surrender, was coming toward the American fleet when Moore stopped him. 2 short bursts from the Hellcat's 6 guns ended the Pacific Air War, the occupation revelation. September 1945. Atsugi Airfield, the first American planes to land after the surrender, were 12 F6F Hellcats from USS Yorktown. Japanese pilots, mechanics, and ground crew stood along the runway to see their tormentor up close. American pilot Lieutenant Robert Vasu Ace, with 19 victories, showed the Hellcat's skills to Japanese pilots. His easy aerobatics loops, rolls, and climbs that would have destroyed a Zero left them speechless. "You have to understand," Vasu said through an interpreter, "this is not even full power. In combat with water injection, it is 20% stronger. The plane can take 13 Gs. I've never broken one." The engineering post-mortem, Japanese engineers studying.
Captured Hellcats after the war saw the real American industrial power. The Pratt & Whitney R2-800 engine had 2,840 precision parts, each fitting any other R2-800 engine. The Nakajima Sakai engine needed hand-fitting. No 2 engines were the same. Professor Jiro Horikoshi, designer of the Zero, studied the Hellcat after the war. His conclusion was shocking. "We made a plane for 1941. They made a plane system for 1945. While we were perfecting the sword, they were building the industrial age." The production miracle, America's production of the Hellcat itself, became a weapon. The Bethpage, New York factory worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At peak, a new Hellcat came off the line every 60 minutes. The company made 12,275 Hellcats. In 30 months, a number the Japanese could not understand. In 1944, Japan made 5,100 fighters of all types. America made 35,000 fighters that year alone. The production system had innovations that seemed impossible to Japanese workers. Color-coded instructions to build complex parts. Shifts running all the time. Quality kept high, even with speed. The strategic revolution. The Hellcat did not just win fights. It changed naval warfare. Pre-war thinking. Said carriers were weak and had to strike first to survive. The Hellcat changed this. Carriers became fortresses that could take and fight back against any air attack. Admiral Mark Mitcher, commander of Task Force 58, understood this. "With the Hellcat, we do not have to find them first. Let them come. The F6F will destroy them when we want." This confidence led new kinds of attacks. American carriers could sit off enemy coasts for weeks, protected by Hellcats, making them almost untouchable. The cultural collision beyond technology. The Hellcat showed a culture and way of thinking that proved Japanese military rules wrong. The samurai tradition focused on personal skill, spiritual strength, and accepting death. The Hellcat showed careful planning, material power, and saving life. This big difference meant Japanese pilots could not change to Hellcat tactics even when they understood them. The idea of avoiding fights when at a disadvantage, which is key to Hellcat style, was impossible for Japanese pilots trained in Bushido. The judgment of history. In 1962, the United States Navy held a meeting about Pacific War aviation. American and Japanese veterans came together to talk about the war with history in mind. Captain David McCampbell, the Navy's ace of aces with 34 victories, said simply, "The Hellcat won the Pacific Air War period. It destroyed Japanese aviation and made our victory sure." Commander Saburo Sakai said, "The Zero was a better fighter. The Hellcat was a better weapon system. We never understood the difference until it was too late. We brought swords to a gunfight and wondered why we lost the ultimate reckoning." The Hellcat's dominance can be shown by simple numbers that tell a deep story. Kill ratio 19-1 overall, 13-1 against Zeros. Hellcats made 12,275 planes in 30 months. Zeros made from 1943 to 1945. About 6,000 American pilots trained on Hellcats. Over 5,000 Japanese pilots left by August 1945 Fewer than 100 could fight. Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa, who led the Japanese fleet at the Philippine Sea, gave maybe the most honest view. We laughed at the Hellcat because we did not understand. It was not just a plane, but a whole way. A nation fights. By the time we stopped laughing, our Air Force had disappeared. The last word. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai lived until 2000. In his last interview, he was asked about the Hellcat. His answer showed its full power. The Zero made Japan a strong naval power. The Hellcat made Japan see it was never as strong as it thought. We thought we were samurai. The Hellcat showed us we were just men with old weapons. Facing the future, every Japanese pilot who survived did so because a Hellcat pilot chose to let them live. That is the ultimate defeat, being at your enemy's choice. The F6F Hellcat started service weighing twice as much as the Zero carrying armor. The Zero did not have. Powered by an engine the Japanese could not build. Armed with weapons they could not match. Guided by radar they could not see, flown by pilots. They could not equal and made in numbers. They could not imagine. Japanese pilots laughed at it because they did not know every extra pound was not weakness, but the power of a nation that could protect its fighters. By the time they understood, their laughter had turned into last letters home. Their jokes into kamikaze attacks, their confidence into total collapse. The Hellcat did not just beat the Zeros. It destroyed a whole way of war, showing that in modern fights, the nation that builds the better system